Welcome to the Pulse of Story podcast. I am Derek Christopher, and what an incredible guest we have for you today. Now, I'm just waiting to see if he does a psychological assessment of me at the end of this podcast, which makes me a little nervous. But this guy had a storied career in the CIA for 33 years. He went to Yale. He's got his PhD from Yale. He was the first full-time analyst on international terrorism for the CIA. He's written over 50 books. And I don't know how you write 50 books. I mean, that's incredibly prolific.
With both hands.
With and on a variety of topics, from terrorism to humor. Please welcome Ed Mickolus. Ed, good to have you. Good to see you again.
Well, you did that really well. I'm really impressed with you.
Okay, good. Now, one thing that I think that is really interesting about your career, even though you've done all this other stuff, is that you've served as a mentor to writers. You've helped instruct writers, and I want to know how did you get into that? What was it that drove you to want to help writers and instruct writers and mentor them?
Every now and then, I'll give a presentation either at University of North Florida or at a Florida Writers Association meeting or Sisters in Crime or whatever. And people next to me at the next table will come up saying, "Would you mind taking a look at my book?" Yeah, sure. Usually it's because they have CIA in it somewhere and
Right.
they want just a sanity check on it. So happy to do that. Sometimes it's, "Hey, would you mind proofing?" Uh, I was an editor at the agency for 10 years, and I'm really finicky. So I will wrestle any typo to the ground,
Yeah.
and they appreciate that. Sometimes they just want to chat about, "Do you think I have a decent idea here?" So we can kick that around. Sometimes they're looking for a collaborator.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask you. You mentioned collaboration, and a lot of times writers, I think, get kind of stuck because writing can be very lonely if you're at your laptop or even your typewriter and you're writing, whether it's a book or a screenplay. And you talk a bit about collaboration, two-author collaboration and multi-author collaboration. What do you see as the benefit to doing that? And even with your own book, I mean, is that something you would want to collaborate with on people and see what kind of perspective they bring into it?
Probably so. At least for me, the key to collaborating effectively is knowing what you're good at and knowing what your limitations are that somebody else could fill in for you. It's kind of like, does this puzzle piece fit well?
Yeah.
So you figure out what you're maybe not good at. Now, I know how to do all sorts of nonfiction writing, but I haven't done a novel by myself. So I will chat with other novelists and say, "What do you think of this idea?" "Oh, yep, that sounds good." So I then know how to put together, say, a character Bible. Do you use those in your writing?
Yes.
Okay. So I put together a character Bible and I put together photos as well of what this individual should look like so that you have continuity in eye color and skin
Yeah.
tones and whatever. On page 5, they have blue eyes. They still have blue eyes on page 186. And you give it backstory, and you might not use all of that, but nonetheless. So I know how to write that. And I know how to come up with at least the vestiges of a plot, but I need someone who knows how to get inside the heart of a character or of
Right.
several characters. And I like to have somebody to just bounce ideas off. So I've done that now with Tracy Tripp on a book, which won a writing award from Florida Writer Association. I was delighted. It
Yeah.
was not in a field that either of us had really written in, uh, crime fiction and procedurals, but nonetheless, we did okay with it. We are now working on another one called "And Presumed Dead." People sometimes need to get out of a situation they're in. Uh, they're in a bad relationship, the mob's coming after them, the tax authorities coming after them, whatever. But they want to ensure that people aren't going to keep chasing them, so they fake their death.
Yeah.
Now, there are about 50 cases that I've been able to find throughout history of people who have faked their death, but the reason that we know that is that they were unsuccessful doing it. So I bet that somewhere there's a company or group of companies that has expertise in faking your death and helping you to reestablish some sort of existence elsewhere.
Sure.
So we are creating a character who needs to fake her death and goes to company A, which provides her with certain services. They might be retired U.S. Marshals, let's say.
Yeah.
Uh, but she does something wrong and gets caught, goes to company B, and they have a different skill set, and on it goes. Similar to what Dante wrote in the Inferno. She keeps
Yeah.
going to different companies, and goes down further and further into a rabbit hole that she can't get out of
Now,
until
well, let me ask you real quick. What's the longest time period in your research that you found that someone was able to fake their death or be presumed dead?
maybe 30 years.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah. But I mean, some are discovered almost immediately.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of cases in which I'm sure that the police found them by they used a credit card at a gas station.
So, is it like a privatized version of witness protection?
Essentially so.
Yeah.
So that's at least what we have in mind for this. I haven't seen that type of company exist anywhere.
No, and rightfully so. You don't. It's like Fight Club. You don't talk about Fight Club. It doesn't exist.
Correct. And who
So,
knows, maybe we'll use that as the name of one of the companies.
so when
Uh,
you're collaborating, then, so when you're working with Tracy, how do you know where your strengths are? How do you know where her strengths are? And if you're working with a new writer to collaborate, how do you sort of assess this is the person that I want to work with? Is it based on knowing what they've already done?
Essentially so.
Yeah.
I've read pretty much everything that Tracy has written, except perhaps for her grocery list. Uh,
Yeah.
so I've got a pretty good feeling for what she can write, and I like the voice that she writes in.
Yeah.
So we will kick around. Let's see what we should do in this chapter. This needs to happen. I'll go research this part of that story. Like here's 50 guys who have done whatever,
Yeah.
or here's what a U.S. Marshal actually does in trying to hide someone. And she'll synthesize all of that and come up with something that was far better than what I would have come up with.
Yeah. And then if that's working with one collaborator, what if you have multiple people involved in the story and the writing?
Okay, so there are two types of situations where that can occur. One is if you're putting together an anthology.
Okay.
So it can be just short stories or short essays. So I've done that with a number of books.
Yeah.
For example, when I was a recruiter at the agency, people would ask me, what would I personally do with my background? I don't want to be James Bond. I don't necessarily want to be an analyst briefing the president. I've done both of those jobs.
Yeah.
But what else could I do?
Yeah.
So I asked a bunch of my friends throughout the building, I know that you don't have time to write a 300-page memoir, but you got time to write 10 pages of cool stuff you did. And this could help find your replacement, essentially, and you could mentor them as well. What do you think? So, first book I did, about 3 dozen people raised their hand and handed me something. And
Wow.
it's what's a librarian do? What's a security guy do? What's an auditor do? What's a finance guy do? All sorts of other things that you wouldn't necessarily think. It was reasonably successful. It's in a second edition now, and it's has an audiobook version of it. So
Oh, cool.
that. Um, a bunch of other jobs weren't covered. So in a second version of that, called More Stories from Langley, I asked another group of maybe 3 dozen people, tell me about your jobs. What's an engineer do? What's a chemist do? What's a nurse do?
Yeah.
So they came out with yet another book. So that's what you do with trying to put together an anthology.
Right.
It's just really networking and finding people that have something to offer.
Well, then how important is the editing to that? Because someone needs to take all of those unique voices together and make it into one voice for the final product.
Although you're not telling a story so much. So it's okay if they retain their own voices. You've seen anthologies of short stories, for example.
Sure.
Um, those are not in the same voice.
Right.
Now, where it does help is the second type of collaboration, which I don't have a term for this genre because it's so rare. Um, did you read when you were a kid, Naked Came the Stranger?
No,
But you might have heard of it.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay, so a number of journalists got together and said, let's put together the worst written potboiler ever.
Yeah.
You write the first chapter, I'll write the second, he'll write the third, and on it goes.
Yeah.
So it is written serially, but it's not printed serially the way you might find in a magazine, let's say, where they run a chapter in November, a chapter in December, and on it goes. Agatha Christie apparently started this with the Admiral back in 1931,
Right.
and there have been a bunch since then. In Florida, there's Naked Came the Manatee, which Dave Barry and Elmore Leonard and a few others put together.
Yeah.
So I said, this might work for putting together a spy thriller. So I contacted, at the moment, it's about 24 CIA officers, each of whom have written at least one spy thriller, so that I know that they can write that particular type of thing.
Right.
And said, what do you think? Let's give it a try. So I wrote the first chapter. And again, I know that I'm not a novelist per se, but I know how to write stuff that you might find on a CI officer's desk.
Right.
So I wrote a cable from the field. I wrote something from the newsletter, which I wrote while I was at the agency. I wrote a President's Daily Brief about the issue. Wrote various talking points that one might use in briefing the director. All that kind of stuff I put together to just kick it off. And then
Yeah.
I handed it to someone else, and it's off to the races. And that's where,
Now,
go for it.
now I was gonna say, now have you tried to apply that towards screenplays or TV scripts? Because you write in a very visual way, you talk in a very visual way, which seems to lend itself to a film or TV show.
And I do have a couple of friends who are script writers, and that may well happen. We'll see.
Yeah.
Again, have you written for TV or movies?
I've tried, it's really hard. To me, I think trying to get into the character's voice is the most difficult thing. And that's what I find so interesting about your past, having done political and psychological assessments of world leaders, is that you seem so poised to be inside the head of different characters doing different things. And I think that's a very difficult task to do.
Sure, and you have to do it in dialogue and
Yeah.
in action, as opposed to a novel where you can really sit in someone's head the way Tracy does.
Yeah.
So it may well come to pass that I will pitch one of my screenwriter buddies, hey, here's an idea. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, the whole idea about having a privatized witness protection company, I love that idea. That seems to lend itself to a great TV series.
Probably so.
Yeah.
Um, it's similar to what Richard Kimball was facing when he had to move from time to
Right.
time. So we'll see. Maybe so.
So let me ask you, when you were doing these assessments of the world leaders, what's the big takeaway when you're talking to them? Are you thinking these guys are crazy? These guys are brilliant? I mean, what's going through your head as you're doing these assessments?
To the extent that I can talk about this,
Yes.
uh, I do not sit down with a world leader,
Okay.
alas. You're doing this at distance.
Right.
So instead, you're essentially writing a biography. But rather than write a biography of Churchill or Washington, you're doing it of somebody contemporary,
Yeah.
and you're considering the audience. Rather than writing for historians, you're writing for people who have to deal with this individual.
Okay.
So, what makes them tick? How do you negotiate with them? That's essentially what you're being asked.
And then how can writers apply that to what they do, to either to books or to screenplays or whatever it might be?
There are a number of books on political psychology already. I mean, there
Yeah.
are books written on presidents and the like. I was in the Yale Politics and Psych program, so there are books like that coming out of that program at least. So easy enough. I used to collaborate with a psychiatrist. Not that I needed one, but
Right.
they would give me the insight on here's what makes this guy tick. And
Yeah.
I could come up with here's how this political environment works and what is needed for this individual to have gotten to the position that they're in.
Yeah.
So again, that's probably, now that I think about it, where I first started to collaborate in writing.
Now, what's your take on AI? Do you think AI could help people collaborate? Does AI, I can tell you for an example. I've been working on a book with an economist, and he's writing a book on economics and baseball. And I've been helping him with it, and I have a very different voice than he has. But what I contribute, I've actually put into AI and tried to make it sound like it's in his voice, so it's sort of uniform, and it's done a pretty good job. I'm shocked to say, and I don't know if that's a good thing or if that's a dangerous thing.
There are, at the moment, what I can see are three areas in which AI can contribute substantially. One
Yeah.
is the simple digging around for facts.
Yes.
When you do a Google search, at the top of it, you'll have a summary of what it found. What's this term mean, for example? And it gives you a definition based upon all the stuff that it's learned. Well, it's easy enough, uh, but you have to make sure that you are fact checking it because hallucinations, a term used specifically for AI, uh, we don't need no stinking facts. We'll make stuff up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you always have to be on AI to make sure what are your sources. It's
Yeah.
similar to using Wikipedia.
Yeah.
It can give you a cheap way to research something, but you've got to dig through all the footnotes to make
Right.
sure it is accurately portrayed and that the footnotes themselves are credible. So that's the first area that you might be using AI for. The second, as you suggest, is give me a chapter on this. Um, and I'm glad to hear that it was able to mimic your colleague.
Yeah.
Um, I have a book coming out, I hope in time for Christmas, called Stories by the Side of the Road. Uh, you're driving along, stay with me, this does have a point. Uh,
Yeah.
you're driving along, and you'll see something on the side of the road. The front end of a Honda, a toilet, a bunch of papers. And you might say, how did that stuff get there? There's a story behind that. What is that backstory? So I moved that question on to a bunch of my writerly friends and said, give me a short story, give me flash fiction, give me a haiku, give me a poem, whatever medium you want to use. Don't give me a novella, but
Yeah.
come up with an object and run with it. A friend of mine did that, but asked a bot to do that for him, a chatbot.
Yeah.
So it came up with a couple of stories. Presumably, he gave it the same uh, terms to use, but it came up with very different language. Unfortunately, the stories that they came up with was stilted language, and the stories weren't all that interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, it just lacked a soul. So for the moment, at least, I think writers are probably safe in using it for, well, at least let me organize my thoughts,
Yes.
and then I'll write something from there.
Well, and I always wonder if AI will have the ability to create, to be as creative. Can it write a Fargo? Can it write a No Country for Old Men? Can it write, any famous novel or TV show? Will it ever be able to sort of innovate to that extent? And if it's to me, if it's based on everything else that people have written and thought about, does the human mind create and innovate in a way differently than a machine would?
Sure. And oddly enough, you bring us to the third area in which AI is interacting with authors. There are now companies that are reaching out to authors, principally publishing houses, and saying, we would like to use your books or your journal articles or whatever to help train AI in writing.
Right.
And we'll give you a piece of the action if it writes anything. I chatted with Authors Guild. Do you use them?
I No, I don't use them. No.
Okay, but you know about them.
Yes.
Okay. For your listeners who don't, uh, it offers an excellent group of attorneys who know all sorts of contract law, copyright law, etc. And I asked them, can you take a look at this contract and what they're offering? And they said, you don't know what's going to happen to your rights in those books, and you don't know how your stuff is going to be used. You might want to make sure that it's ironclad that it can only be used for this. And even so, I don't know that I would trust them.
Yes.
So at the moment, I'm staying away from it.
Well,
Now, I
and
purport to be an attorney. Yeah, I got into law school, but nonetheless, uh,
yeah.
I'm not an attorney, but it made sense to me.
Now, see, this is the issue that the Writers Guild is facing, is that writers, screenwriters, and TV writers are going to Chat GPT or OpenAI, and they're asking it to come up with a version of a story from something they had already written, and all of their scripts have already been scrubbed by AI, and it's basically regurgitating its own characters back to them, and they have no protection, and they want the studios to start suing the companies to protect their works.
Now we're at a really early stage in how we deal with AI. I'm sure the law is going to quickly try to catch up to that.
Yeah.
But 20 years down the road, when we have this conversation again, I bet the issues are going to be far different from those. But
Oh, absolutely.
but for the moment, what we're looking at are indeed those issues. A
Yeah.
final, by the way, that AI might be able to help with is something that we used in very early computer programming, just automating how you do social media.
Yeah.
I generally post to some 60 different Facebook book promotion sites. It takes a bit of time to do that. I'm sure that you could write a simple program. It doesn't have to have the grandeur of AI behind it.
Yeah.
Just find this, post to here, much the way we used to do with direct mail.
I want to talk a little bit about, one thing that I read that you had in one of your books, you talked about thinking and the different kinds of thinking. And I wanted to sort of go through a couple things to get your thoughts on the difference between the two. For example, you talk about critical thinking versus intuitive thinking.
What we're looking for here is how do you be creative? Now, most people started off in life as creative thinkers. Do you have kids?
No, I don't.
Um, Kids will try anything. They don't know
Yeah.
any better. They don't know the rules. So you'll discover all sorts of things that they're doing. Once they get into school, what is school for? It's to learn the rules.
Yeah.
It's to learn what other people have experienced and what they have taken from that. So they then go into some kind of company or some kind of profession which has rules. And in order to follow rules, you need essentially straightforward literalism, left brain thinking. When you retire, all of a sudden you don't have all of that structure in front of you anymore. And you have this great unknown. And in order to deal with essentially something that doesn't have rules supporting it in some kind of infrastructure, you need to have creative thinking.
Yeah.
Also called right brain. I mean, physically, that's not how it happens.
Right.
We have creativity in both sides. But what you're looking at is, okay, how do I become creative? Well, there are several phases of creativity, and then there's innovation, which is separate from creativity. So let's take a look at what creativity entails.
Yeah.
First, you have to be in the proper physical space. Where are you most creative? What are you doing physically?
You know what? It could be anytime, anywhere. And what I end up doing, and my wife always laughs at me, is that I will just start looking up and all these thoughts will be coming to my head. And I go into my own world for a second and it just hits me like that. It could be anywhere though. There's no particular room or seat or chair that I have to be in.
Okay. And you are probably not getting your creative thinking done by sitting in a chair staring at a screen.
No, no.
Uh, do you get creative thoughts when you're walking?
Yeah, if I'm seeing things, that's why it was so interesting when you were talking about when you see an item on the side of the road, because I find myself doing that a lot, that I wonder, how did it get there? Where did it come from? And what was the story behind it?
I've still got openings if you would like to send me something.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Welcome it. Um, in the meantime, uh, you can be walking, you can be running, you can be exercising. A lot of creative people that I've talked to get their best ideas in the shower. Uh,
Yeah,
Creative people are proud people and clean people. So, what all of that entails is that you are doing something that doesn't require a lot of uh, rules based intellectual heavy lifting.
right.
So, left brain walks out for a moment, and right brain looks around, in your case, physically looks around,
Yeah,
and says, ooh, I can come out to play. Let's try this idea. Let's try this idea. So you're all of a sudden getting all these creative ideas. And the rule is the more ideas you come up with, the likelier it is that you'll get clever creative ideas. So you don't want to self edit all of those out yet.
yeah,
That's what left brain is for, and you don't need left brain at the moment. You then are faced with, how do I capture those ideas? And if you're driving with your wife, you just lean over and say, could you write this down?
yeah,
Or if you're in the shower, there is now a soap where you can write on the glass of your shower, here's the idea I've got.
yeah,
Or you can pull out your phone and call yourself and say, here's the idea. But you always have to have some way of recording it. I always have a little pad of paper with me so that when some dumb idea hits me, I've got it ready. And the
yeah,
reason that you need to do that, and the reason that you forget those ideas, is something that the Duke University Psych Department calls the Velcro theory of memory. You know what Velcro looks like.
yes,
You got
yeah.
these little,
The little loops.
well, with a new idea, it doesn't have a whole lot of these things to try to grab onto. So if you don't write it down immediately, it's not going to sit up there on its own. So
Yeah.
you got to write it down.
I came up with an idea. In fact, we filed the provisional patent. We're working on filing the patent right now, and it was an idea that came to me when I was sitting in the lounge at LAX in the international
Hmm.
terminal, and I pulled out my laptop and I just cranked out 2 pages of description, and it pretty much the patent that we're filing is identical to what I wrote those 2 pages. I mean,
Outstanding.
it comes to you, and like you said, you have to write it down, because if I hadn't written it down then, I wouldn't have remembered half the stuff.
A lot of people tell me that they get their best ideas either in dreams or when they are falling asleep
Yeah,
or when they wake up. So always have that pad of paper on your nightstand.
yeah,
Or Edison and I think it was Leonardo da Vinci used to put a pie tin right next to them, and they would sit up in a chair and they would have a bunch of marbles in their hand.
yeah,
And as they were just drifting off, their hand would relax and the marbles would drop onto that pie tin, wake them up,
yeah.
and they immediately write what they were thinking then.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
That might have given us the light bulb. Who knows?
yeah, yeah,
So you always have to be capturing that idea.
yeah.
And another part of creativity is you have to be aware of what your hidden assumptions are, what your mindsets are, what your biases are. And it's really difficult to come up with those. For an example, what is half of 8?
4.
Okay, now, what's your hidden assumption about what I just asked you?
The hidden assumption is you're just asking me a straightforward math question.
Math question, right.
Yeah.
So if we say, okay, good job, but there are more than just one answer if we don't make it just a math problem. You're always looking for the n plus 1th solution.
Aha. Yeah, yeah.
And as you get further and further away from the standard, it's probably 4, redefine the problem. Okay, it's not a math problem. So now let's look at 8. It's half of 8.
See, my mind goes, why are you asking me?
Okay.
I mean, that's really the first thought. It's like I'm thinking, if we were just in conversation, you said that, I would think, okay, you've got, there's some ulterior motive to you asking me this. You're looking for a particular answer.
No, I'm not. Uh,
Okay,
I'm looking for a non-4 answer
because
because that's going to show you that there's more than one right answer.
okay,
And the further away you get from conventional thinking, conventional in this case being there's one right answer because this is a math problem,
yeah,
more clever answers you're going to come up with. So one of your mindsets was Ed's trying to trick me because I've dealt with
right,
Ed before. And
yeah,
he worked at the agency. And I know that that's what he
yeah,
does.
yeah.
So assume all of that away and just what's half of 8. You can be visual on this as well.
Oh, then I would just go to like a slice of pizza that you had half of what you ate.
Excellent. You have come up with a very non-standard way of answering that. Most people will first go through, okay, let's look at the 8. Can I flip it on the side? Can I cut it? You instead came up with, well, here's another use for 8, ATE.
Yeah,
If we take those letters, what's half of ATE?
at I
Sure, at and
oh,
TE.
okay,
Or if you spell it the way the number is, you can come up with,
EIGHT. Yeah,
right, okay, so you split those. Or if you look at the number 8 visually,
right.
what's half of that visual?
0.
Right. What's another way to cut that? You cut it
Oh,
across.
half of 8. I got it. Yeah, yeah.
Right. So you can get from that.
Right.
For our listeners, what's half of 8 if you cut it that way?
Yeah. By the way, I'm looking at the camera. I'm not looking at the screen. So if you're doing something visually, that's why I'm not responding to
Okay,
it.
fair enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough. And you probably want me to look at the camera as well, then. So I'll do
No,
that.
no, it doesn't matter. No, that doesn't
Okay.
matter. No, no.
In any case, if you look at 8 like this, and
Yeah.
you can then break it, you can get 3, you can get E.
Okay.
Is that standard Arabic numeral the only way that we can show the quantity 8?
No, I mean, there's several ways to show the quantity 8.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you make those half of 8. And you go on.
Ah, that
And
is so cool. Yeah.
so I don't want to use up all of our time on just that, but there are hundreds of ways that you can show 8 and half of it.
That's a great exercise. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what you're looking for, is coming up with different ways of looking at a question and always refining the question, always thinking, what's the next right answer?
But Ed, how many people do you find are creative enough to really think in those terms in that way? That you really sort of have to start thinking out of your own head to come up with these things. And can you train yourself to think that way?
Well, I gave a course at the agency on that, and I gave a
Yeah.
course at UNF for the newly retired, how to figure out what you're going to do for the next 30 years, because
Wow.
you
Okay.
have all of those uh, rule-based infrastructures around you anymore. So
Yeah.
who are you? What do you want to be? And we use exactly those techniques. Now, there
That's
are
great.
more straightforward techniques for writers. Uh,
Yeah.
you write out the topic. You're wrestling with a particular issue right now, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You write it out, and then there are a number of techniques to rephrase and reframe that issue. So you reframe it. Sometimes you'll say, aha, if I just substitute this word, it gives me a different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
So in creative
So
thinking, go for it.
I was going to say, so then what's the difference between being creative and being innovative?
Okay. The creative thought is just generating the ideas. Innovation then is, we need to come up with a new product. Here's all these ideas that we've been creative about. Let's pick one.
Yeah.
Now, from there, let's figure out how to test this thing out. Let's prototype this thing, not spend a lot of money on it, but here's where we can fail. Edison, for example, came up with 9,000 formulas for light bulb filaments. He didn't consider himself a failure.
Yeah.
He just said, I now know 9,000 things that I don't have to pursue.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
There are a number of different companies that have done exactly that. You
Yeah.
just try something, you test market it, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But you take the next creative idea, see if this works, and on it goes. So you test market it, and then you keep iterating it. Okay, does the public like it? Can we market this successfully? Can we make enough of these things? How has the environment changed? We've always got to keep changing to meet the demands of the new environment. We don't make buggy whips anymore.
Right. But now, when you write 50 plus books, do you get feedback? Do you say, I have an idea for a book. Let me run it by some people and see what they think? Or do you just say, I have this in my head. I know what I want to do. I know what I want to say. I'm going to put it out there and hope it finds an audience.
Depends upon the book and on the idea.
Okay.
For at least my terrorism books, I've come up with essentially a template for what the book should look like. It was
Yeah.
based on my doctoral dissertation, where I looked at how you can use quantitative events analysis in predicting terrorist behavior. On an individual level, how are you going to get those hostages freed? Or a macro level, what kind of attacks are they going to engage in?
Yeah.
And I've
So,
continued writing that series. So oddly enough, I just happen to have in front of me
oh,
uh,
perfect.
the latest iteration of this. I put one out every 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
There are 22 of these in the series now.
Now, how do you find that that has changed over the years?
A lot of the groups and what motivates them has changed remarkably. There aren't all that many left-wing international terrorists anymore. There aren't that many terrorists who travel. They generally stay in their own country and conduct attacks. Now, there are major ones that people read about in the press. ISIS attacks, Al Qaeda attacks. There weren't that many of them that
Yeah.
required terrorists to travel. Usually it's one or two guys who'll say, no, it sounds good to me. Let's try it at home. So they set
Yeah.
off somewhere.
Now, what did you see that led up to the attack on 9/11? And do you think that a 9/11 type attack could happen today?
A mass casualty attack can happen today, sure.
Yeah.
It won't look like what we saw in 9/11, but it can happen. Um, Terrorism and counterterrorism is always a battle of coming up with innovations in defense and offense.
Yeah.
So they'll try something, we'll try to come up with something to prevent it. Uh, in the 1960s, for example, we had a huge number of hijackings of airplanes,
Right.
and they were for various different reasons. Some were nuts, some were trying to just get money, the most famous being D.B. Cooper.
Yeah.
Some just couldn't afford a ticket to go to Cuba, so they hijacked a plane in Miami.
Hijack the plane, sure. Yeah.
So people then came up with, well, okay, I guess we've got to come up with a way to stop that. So by and large, you don't hear about airline hijackings anymore
Right.
because of TSA screening and all the rest. You can't get in the cockpit, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't mean that terrorists will just throw in the towel. They will come up with new methods, and they'll
Yeah.
still continue to use old methods as well. Terrorists still use simple bombings and simple incendiaries, and you can't stop all of that because they're just
Right.
potential targets.
So let me ask you this then.
Why
So
am I voting for the terrorists win?
yeah, there we go. So when you see people writing spy novels or spy films, what is it that you see is the biggest, I don't know, benchmark of inauthenticity that you see that people are getting wrong?
Oddly enough, here's another example of my collaborating with colleagues. I asked exactly that question
Yeah.
to maybe 200 of my buddies throughout the intelligence community. Uh, we're seeing a lot of TV shows, a lot of movies, novels, you name it. Some are pretty good. Some we actually are in. Uh,
Okay.
I was in a few.
Yeah.
Uh, but what are they getting wrong?
Yeah.
Uh, well, a quick way to figure out if someone knows what we're talking about or not is how they refer to us. If they call us agents, they're dead wrong. Now, everybody in the federal government who is in intelligence or law enforcement calls themselves agents. The FBI calls themselves special agents or sometimes supervisory special agents.
Yeah.
We do not. For CIA folk, we are intelligence officers. Agents are the folks who are overseas, who usually are a foreign individual who are stealing secrets for us.
Yeah.
Sometimes we call them sources, sometimes assets. And that and agent is interchangeable. So if you just hear that, you'll say, oh dear, that doesn't work. As you can tell by looking at me, we are not ferociously good looking. We don't know 14 languages. We can't shoot a fly's wings off at 90 yards. We don't drive Aston Martins, but I have a really cool Honda I can show you later.
There you go.
So it's stuff like that. And
Yeah.
thank you for mentioning my book, Spycraft, for thriller writers, which
Yes.
here's how to ensure that you are vaguely correct in what we do. And
Yeah.
here's what to avoid. Here's what it's really like. Here's what the building looks like. You can get the building right at least.
Yeah. But do you think that, and I don't know if you know the answer to this question, do you think publishers or studio executives will understand how authentic something is if it's submitted to them?
Some of them try to avoid gross errors by hiring former agency folk.
Okay.
So there are a number of folk that have contributed to various shows. Um, some still are aware that you're still trying to sell tickets to your movie.
Right.
And what we do at a desk, by and large, isn't all that interesting looking.
Yeah.
But The Americans, for example, a terrific show, uh, even though it had an awful lot of gunplay and an awful lot of activity by just one couple of Russians,
Yeah.
uh, that was contributed to by an agency individual.
Okay.
So there are all sorts of TV shows and movies that will have a consultant that had some background in intelligence. Might have been CIA, might have been elsewhere.
And then how do you rate things like, Jason Bourne and Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise? Is there any authenticity to those, or?
Um, we generally don't save the world twice before breakfast.
Yeah. But
Um,
if you could,
Generally, we do things at other people's desks. We collaborate.
yeah,
There's no James Bond. There's no uh, Jason Bourne. There's no one guy who is going to do it all.
yeah,
James Bond would be captured within 5 minutes because he was just too showy.
yeah,
Um, we try to sneak in gently, not get noticed. Uh, when my initial entering class was addressed by the director, he said, the most effective spy is one who can't get the attention of waiters
oh,
because you just blend.
not, yeah,
You're not trying to get noticed. Bond's trying to get noticed.
yeah.
Uh,
Now, when you wrote the spycraft book, did you have any hesitation putting it out that I'm giving away the secrets, or I'm putting out too much information there, or no?
Return with me to that secrecy agreement. I
Okay.
had I had to run that by our publications review board.
Yeah,
So it's a group of folks who have done the work of spying and who know what is sensitive and what we can talk about and what we shouldn't.
yeah,
Plus, I told my 200 buddies, and this is going to be published, so let's make sure that I don't get held up by publications review. So
yeah.
everything that you read in that book has been blessed as it ain't classified. Have at it.
Now, when you see a spy movie or you read a spy novel, is it hard for you to get through it because you're just thinking about, it wouldn't happen that way, or that never happens, or that could happen?
But sometimes you read a good one as well.
Okay.
And usually it's by one of the alumni. But there are
Okay.
but there are some again that even though they might have just worked in the news media or some such, have a pretty good feel for what's going on.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I will be thinking, not as. It's called the giggle test.
Yeah.
Um, can you assure yourself that somebody from the intelligence community is not going to laugh at what you just said?
Yeah.
Which is why I went to my 2 dozen friends from the agency and said, let's put together something that would show what it is that we do in real life.
Yeah.
We'll still have something that involves, oh God, the world's going to explode. We're going to fix this somehow. But how would we go about it?
All this amazing education, this amazing career, and you've written 50 books. I mean, it takes somebody, to me, incredibly prolific and driven to want to write 50 something books. How is it that you're so prolific? What is it that drives you to do it?
Incredibly enough, you'll see behind me, essentially a time chart. Uh, it's a question of just how do you organize your time. Here's how at least I am prolific. I figure out all the little things that I need to do. So I need to do research and outlining for a book. Then I need to write the first chapter. After that, I need to maybe pitch an acquisition editor who's in a standard commercial firm. And then
Yeah.
have to finish the first draft. Then have to send, if I'm writing on spy stuff, have to send it to the publications review board. And on it goes. You have to just come up with, okay, I could do this little part of it today. I could do this little part of it tomorrow, but I'm always moving the book along, as opposed to thinking, I'm going to write a 900-page book. Well, that's just overwhelming.
I was just going to say that's how you stop from being overwhelmed by it.
So in turn, you then come up with, okay, here are the books that I want to be writing. Here's his words. Here's more stories from Langley. Here's an anthology. Here's Take My Weight, Please. And on it goes. Here's the terrorism books. Here's creativity techniques for writers. And then in these little cells, you write, okay, I've done this part of it on this date, and here's where I find that file. So if I find that I am just for whatever reason frozen on a particular chapter and can't get out of what appears to be a writer's block, I've never actually experienced that, but nonetheless, I just move on to another book. And I'm in a different phase of writing that book.
Now, how important is it for you to visualize that so you can see it every day?
I used to be doing this. I don't do it as much anymore.
Yeah.
Because I've got a pretty good idea of where I stand in all of these books.
Yeah. That's
But
great.
it certainly was helpful, and to teach it, this is more a teaching tool that I use.
Right.
When I teach how to become a prolific writer, I will use this with my classes.
But I could definitely see how writers would want to use that to sort of track their progression and sort of inspire them that, like you said, if they do a little part of it each time, it's not nearly as overwhelming as thinking I have to write a 150-page script or a 900-page book.
Right. I learned this from a guy named Richard Armour, who was essentially the Dave Barry of the 1950s. He
Yeah.
wrote humorous histories. It all started with Stones and Clubs. It all started with Shakespeare, whatever. And he said, you can write a whole bunch of, in his case, it was just quick little humorous articles for the Wall Street Journal. And what you want to do is have your books or your articles in various phases and line them up the way you would airplanes on a runway. This one's ready to take off. This one is sitting around waiting for that guy to take off. This one is bringing in passengers. This one is gassing up.
So you want it very linear the way you're going to approach it.
It can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that seems to be very effective for people who are sort of scattered and all over the place.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is an easy way to organize. What do you do for your hobbies?
Oh, I'm usually trying to think of if I want to develop some sort of TV show or if I want to take a trip or I want to do something along those lines.
Okay. And some people collect stamps or whatever their hobby is,
Yeah.
or blow out their knee by playing pickleball.
Yeah.
So take that time that you devote to your hobbies, and I just devote that time to writing.
Ah,
And to me, it's still a hobby. It's still fun. And looking at
yeah.
my sales, it's clearly a hobby.
Yeah.
So from there, what you do is you figure out, okay, what specific things do I need to do to get the book done? And you can chunk it into little bitty things. Well, if you're, you know the difference between pantsers and outliners. An outline
Pounds.
will outline everything that they want the book to cover. in
Yeah.
minute detail, like Jeffrey Deaver, who writes thrillers and police procedurals,
Yeah.
will take 9 months writing a huge outline and then just 1 month and actually filling it in and writing the book. Pantsers, on the other hand, write by the seat of their pants. They have to
Okay.
find it. They instead create these interesting characters and they let them deal with each other. Reminiscent of how the show Dallas always struck me.
Yeah.
They've got all these interesting characters and you just stir them around and they bump into each other and things happen. So pantsers watch the characters and whatever makes sense for the character to do and interact with this other character is what happens in the book.
Now, can you have a pantser collaborate with an outliner?
Well, at the moment, I'm learning that you can.
Okay.
Because my agency buddies, the group of 24, some are pantsers, some are outliners.
Yeah.
For the overall thrust of the book, I didn't want to burden my writers with it's got to look like this. This has to happen in chapter 7. This has to happen in 14, and it's got to end this way.
Yeah.
Instead, let's see what happens. Be clever. I will keep updating the character Bible. So if you throw in a new character, here's what happens with that character. If you want to bring in characters from your own series, that's fine. The rule is that you may not kill off anybody else's character. You may not marry them off. You may not break their leg, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Leave them alone, but you can use them otherwise. So we're seeing what will happen with essentially what is structured as a pantser book. But within each chapter, if they want to outline, great, have at it. If
Very
people
nice.
want to kick around ideas with me on, okay, what should happen here, what could happen here, absolutely. But
Yeah.
by and large, my writers are welcome to do with whatever they want in their chapter.
Yeah.
And it is
That
fast to see how the plot develops by having 24 other minds working on the same issue.
that's great. That's great. Well, and this has been incredible. Now, if people want to get a hold of you, do you do consultations? Do you do mentorship? What's the best way? Well, first of all, do you do that? And if so, how can people, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Probably through the website.
Okay. Which we'll put up
Edward
on the screen.
Mickolus, edwardmickolus.com.
Great.
Or if they want to send me an email, they can do that too.
Okay.
edmickolus@hotmail.
And we'll put that up on the screen too.
I also will happily proofread stuff.
Oh, okay. Now, when you proofread, do you just proofread for errors, or are you proofreading for structure and details, or?
Generally, you want me for just finickiness rather than structure.
Gotcha.
I mean,
Gotcha.
I don't know that I want that much to contribute to a book. It's still your book, not mine.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
will find, if I find a glaring error or a continuity error, he was this on page 5, but he's not that anymore on page 186, and you didn't bring us to why that's changed, I'll mention those.
okay. Well, and just checking for the errors that you're talking about, I see that a lot, that a lot of people get back notes from a publisher or they'll get it back from an agent. And the fact that they have typos and errors and structure, things like that, it drives them crazy. And it,
Sure,
it, it knocks them down a few pegs in submitting, whatever it is they submitted.
sure. And people
So,
come to me and assure me that they have proofed this thing 15 times. And I will generally say, tell you what, if I don't find 100 errors, it's free.
wow. There you go.
Now, I'm
There you
not
go.
going to offer that to all of our listeners here
Of course.
because somebody out there is going to read this again. But by and
All
large,
right, Ed.
we'll find
Yeah.
errors.
Okay. So finally, now we've had this conversation. What is your psychological assessment of me?
Oh, you're a delight to chat with.
Oh, oh, thank you.
You are enthusiastic. Um, you react quickly. You think on your feet well. Um, you're a great listener. You're doing what you should be doing.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you. Well, what a way to end. That's like the best ending I could possibly ask for. Well, Ed Mickolus, it's been an absolute pleasure. I always love talking to you, and hopefully we can have you back really soon because I think there's so many other things that we could be talking about also.
Terrific, because I have 10 more books coming out this year.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. For Ed Mickolus, I'm Derek Christopher. This is The Pulse of Story, and we will see you next time. Take care.